Reiner.
Welcome back to the FutureProof Advisor podcast. Today, I want to explore why creating capacity through AI might be the most dangerous thing for you to do this year if you don't know what it's for. You know, I talk about AI. I love AI. I think it's very fantastic, but I think it's a matter of you know what you're creating the capacity for, and that's what we're going to explore today. I remember when I was really young in this business, and I still consider myself young, but when I was younger in this business, you know, I felt that I was behind everyone else. I wanted to figure out how to make my statement, make myself known, make myself more valuable. Like, how do I create an edge on other people? And I've got a competitive spirit where I grew up, and I always thought that it was necessary to help me show up better with clients, to show up better with my team, to be heard more, to have my ideas be bought into more. And I just really also just wanted to learn. I have this thirst for learning, which has never died. And I made a decision early on in my career that one day a month, I was just going to go to the library. I was going to take some stuff, like articles, books, things, whatever it may be, and just go to the library and spend all day in the library. And I would have no distractions. It'd be a quiet space. And I would just sit there and I would just consume information and I would learn. And I sometimes structured what I would learn. And like throughout the month, I'd like be like, hey, I'll just put it towards my one day, my library day. And I felt that this was making progress relative to my peers. I felt like I was gaining knowledge. And I remember there was this older advisor that worked with us. He had been in the business for, I don't know, 40, 45 years. And I told him what I was doing. And he's like, I never see you on this day. Like, where are you? And I was like, well, I go to the library. And he's like, why do you do that? And I told him, I was like, well, I'm going because I'm trying to learn and have some focus time. And he just looked at me like bewildered, like what, like I was from outer space. But I kept doing it anyways. And, you know, the thing that I realized is as I did it early on, it scratched an itch to help me think that I was learning more. And I was learning. There was no doubt about that. But learning without a purpose, learning without a what or a why really just goes into kind of like the ether. Like I learn it, and we all know those studies. Like you hear something, you read something. The best way to understand and information and concepts, you know, is to teach it. And so if you're reading it, you probably remember like 20% of it a couple hours later. And that's what was happening. Like I would go to the library, I would learn, and then the next day I'd go back into my office and I'd get back into the same thing, and I wouldn't really apply what I learned. There was no what, there was no why behind what I was doing, other than I just wanted to learn more. But why did I want to learn more? What was I learning for? What was I going to apply this learning to? None of those questions were answered before I started to just go to the library and learn. I didn't have a plan. And so although I set up a process to consume more information and learn, it kind of stopped there. And it was basically like in the tech world, it was like a silent failure. When technology stops working, you just don't even know because it's silent. That's kind of what it was. And the tension is that intention is really more than just doing something deliberately. It's doing something deliberately toward a specific why, towards a specific what, towards a specific purpose, towards a specific outcome that you want. Learning is too broad just to learn. Well, what am I going to use that learning for? Okay, to be able to talk with my clients. But what am I talking to them about? What am I going to present? Am I going to change my meetings and the information that I present in them based on what I learned? And if you don't have that specificity, then the intentionality of the action is pretty much worthless and pointless, and is not necessarily useful. And so I stopped going to the library. Once I had that realization, I stopped doing that. I started to figure out how to apply. Learn by doing is kind of been my mantra because I learned it from that. I was learning, but I wasn't learning by doing. I needed to apply it. And I think that there's this point where AI creates massive capacity. AI is going to create opportunity, but without intentionality, we're going to fill that capacity with everything, just more of what we are doing today. And that's, I think, the challenge, right? What I am seeing across the industry as I talk to advisors, as I go to conferences, I recently went up to the NVIDIA conference out in San Jose, is, teams are automating a lot of things. They're automating research, right? They're producing 30-page meeting prep documents. They're They're building AI workflows for client communications to really, now they're communicating with their clients instead of quarterly, like they're communicating weekly. And we're solving the how to get things done faster, but we're never answering the why. The why being, why are we making things faster? We can say it's for the client. Okay, then I might say, well, what are we going to do with that capacity? And I think that that's where we struggle, and that's where we get into this like rut. And this is why I think, are feeling that AI isn't making us more efficient, because we feel that we have more work than ever before. But it's because we are solving the capacity problem, but we're not solving the intentionality of what we're going to do at that time. America is reporting in 2011, reporting never having enough time. That's what they were reporting in a study. It said 70% of people in 2011 said they didn't have enough time. This was like unprofessional. Like, do I have enough time to work? Do I have enough time to get things done? 2011, 70% of people said they didn't have enough time. That's pretty high. Now, 2011, remember, it was like a time when like software as a service, these technologies that we use, was like really ramping up. Productivity softwares were really ramping up, like Todoist, the app, now had a phone that could have the apps, that could have your to-do lists and all that type of stuff. And so from 2011 to 2018, that same study was asked. In 2018, that same question was asked. Are you able to get things done? And Americans said, no. 80% of Americans in 2018 said never have enough time to get things done. In a period of time when productivity, technological efficiency, all of that was like raging. To create more efficiency, creating more time. People had more time. They were doing less of what they were doing prior to 2011 in that period of time, but they didn't have enough time. And so the question gets to, as we explore this, is like, why? Why is that the case? We have better tools, we have better technology, but we feel more starved for time than ever before. And I think that there's a few areas for this, right? One is something that we've talked about many times, both in the podcast and the newsletter, around Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that work will expand to fill the time available, meaning that if I give you a project, the project likely you can get done in 2 days, but if I give you a deadline of 2 weeks, that project is going to take 2 weeks. We're going to take the allotted amount of time. This is the challenge. If any of you have kids, this is the challenge that we have with kids doing homework and studying for tests. If the test is in 2 weeks, we're not starting to study 2 weeks before. We're studying the night before, because we have that ability. But we know that we could have studied less or got all of our studying done well before, right? And it's not that the work requires more time. We just think that because we have more time, we can take up that time. And sometimes it's really interesting. We think that by doing more, that because we have that much time, that we should fill up that time. That the person that's giving us the timeline believes something that we don't believe, that task should take longer than what the time really takes for us to commit or to complete it. And so if we complete it in a short period of time, it looks bad to the person that created the task, because it may seem that we didn't do as much work because it's supposed to take that long. Psychology, it's crazy. This is why I love to nerd out about the neuroscience and how our brain works, right? I think that the value, like, we fill that vacuum thinking that time determines complexity, and that is completely backwards. If AI makes a research report easier to generate, we're not going to produce fewer reports. Now we're going to produce more. I mean, I've seen it with my leadership team. The amount of reports that I have been reading is more than ever before. And it's because it's so easy now to generate like these really dense, high quality, like thoughtful reports based on information that you select and provide. But it's like now high quality, detailed, and you can provide these reports. And so you produce more of them. There's an explosion. And so the time that has been saved by creating reports is now consumed by reading the reports, right? It used to take a long time to create a report. And now that free time, it used to take a week maybe to create a report. Now we can create it in 1 hour. Now that saved time is filled with, now we've got 10 other reports that we have to read. So we're filling that time. And so that freed capacity is gone. And speaking of capacity, like when we think about capacity, what really is happening is we're confusing capacity, which is volume, time, the amount of time that we have, with capability, which is the effectiveness. And AI what AI does, and I am a big fan of AI, but I think with any tool, with any innovation, you have to learn how to apply it inside of your day to day. And I think that that's where there's been a struggle. And with AI, AI only creates capacity, it creates volume, it creates time. It doesn't create capability and effectiveness. Capacity is how many hours we have, how many clients we have, capabilities, what skills, what quality, all of that. And what happens is that when you pair the two, we become the bottleneck. We become the bottleneck. We are capable, but we are exhausted. I mean, I can only read like one report a day, like reading 3 of those things. Like, it's so great. Like, I love learning, but it's like, I'm not learning. I've got to learn and I got to tie it back together to everything. I get exhausted. And so we just continue to push harder rather than become smarter because we say we don't have time to rethink how we work. Isn't that funny? AI has helped us create capacity, but we're pushing harder. We're more exhausted. And we keep saying we don't have time to rethink because we're just moving so fast. And I think that that is the challenge of it, right? You think back to Javon's paradox from 1865, Javon's paradox from 1865. I thought that this was really interesting, right? Steam engines became more fuel efficient. They became more fuel efficient, meaning that they didn't need as much coal. And so coal consumption was thought to fall, right? Steam engines were the buyers, let's just say, of coal. Now they don't need as much coal. And so the assumption, economic theory would say that coal consumption would fall. But instead it exploded. Because increasing efficiency of a resource lowers its price. The demand for it goes down, supply stays the same. To create equilibrium, you have to lower your price. And now at a lower price, people now look to coal as an opportunity for other energy opportunities, other resources, to be an efficient way of producing energy using coal. And so now demand goes up as opposed to down from that standpoint. And that is the opportunity that efficiency creates. And so it stimulates demand and increases consumption. And AI is doing exactly this. That's exactly what AI is doing. The cost to take an idea to reality is lower than ever. The time needed to do something is lower than ever. And so we would think that that would create all this freedom, just like we thought coal would not be as much in demand. But now all this free time has been filled because there's this demand. I think about it in this way. I spent 10 years or 8 years building a technology solution, lots of iterations. We raised $7.5 million, plus we used some other additional capital as well to build this. It took us 8 years, and we closed it down. Today, I could build that entire company for $200 in a weekend. That is how crazy this world has become, right? The ease of things is crazy. And so, I think that what this means is that AI is not going to eliminate what we are doing. It's going to give us the opportunity to do more things, right? It's going to give us the opportunity, and it's to do things that we never thought we could do before, like taking that crazy idea that we thought about on our drive home and turning it into a reality by the time we get home, and then testing it as a prototype the next morning we get into the office. Like that in the world 5 years ago seemed nutso. And today, that is a reality. And so you can see how our time gets filled. But if we're not intentional about it, then we're going to fill it with a lot of what we're already doing. I think that the idea of AI taking jobs away is the same thing as the idea of coal being reduced drastically. The idea that AI is going to take jobs away, as I believe, is completely false. I think it's completely wrong. I think what's actually happening is that because AI is now allowing us to have an explosion of ideas, that there's going to be more jobs. More ideas are going to come to fruition to create more companies. More companies are going to need more resources for different things than what we know today, but we can't imagine that because we never experienced it. Just like with the coal example. And I believe that this is a new industrial revolution. I'm not breaking news. Many people have said that, but I completely agree with it. AI is going to create more ideas. It's going to create more companies, create more services, more things that have to be maintained. The jobs that we may have had may be different, but the need for employment in humans is going to be more than ever, I think, in my mind. And I think that the firms that thrive will be the ones that understand that and lean into AI with intentionality. Because breaking free requires 4 levels of clarity before AI automation really works. And intentional protection of the capacity that is created via AI. That is super important in my opinion. That is really, really important, right? I think that we need the 4 layers in my mind, or we start with problem clarity. What issue are you trying to solve, right? Strategy needs to drive the tool. So if we're using AI to help us write more emails, let's just use that as an example. We're using AI to help us write emails faster. So now, as opposed to 5 minutes writing an email, it takes us 1 minute. We have to be intentional of what is the problem. Well, the problem is I don't have enough time to think about strategy or to rethink how we work as a firm. Okay, that's a great problem. That's a great problem to solve. And so now I can then go and say, okay, how do I use AI to help me create that time? And once I get that time, I am going to do X, Y, and Z with that to help me with my strategy or rethinking how I work. So I'm now going to, instead of writing, I send 200 emails a day. That's going to save me this many minutes. So now I have 3 hours a week that I'm going to use for this. That's layer number 1. Layer number 2 is workflow stability. Your current processes must behave consistently today. So like if you don't understand how work flows, where decisions get made, how exceptions are handled, then it's not going to work. AI is not going to understand it either. AI is not going to solve that problem. AI will just make things up. And AI doesn't have insight into how you work. And when I think about workflow stability, I think about how, for instance, like how do you check your emails? Are you checking your emails every single day? Are you checking your emails every single hour of every day? Maybe you create a workflow where you're only checking it 2 times a day. Check it in the morning, you check it at the end of the day. If you're doing that, and AI is automating a lot behind the scenes so that that time is more efficient, then that could help you as opposed to having to check it every single hour. So you have to understand what your workflow is, and you have to create a stable workflow from that standpoint. And then third is governance. Like, who is accountable when outcomes surprise you, right? Who owns what part of the process? This has to be determined before we automate anything. Whether it's an automation in a workflow, right? That's where workflow stability comes in for like a process that's a team process, or in an individual process, how you work. And then you have to be understanding of saying, well, how am I going to govern if the automation works or it doesn't, and that people follow the same process? And you got to define this before you automate. And then once you have all those layers, then you can start looking at AI automation. And then you can start looking at AI usage and AI tools. Because I think that people jump to doing AI first, thinking that they have clarity around the problem, thinking that they have their workflow defined, and thinking that they have the governance mechanisms in there, whether it's personal or team-wide, and it fails because AI makes things up, so then they get frustrated at hallucination. But the reality is that we don't really understand the process in the first place. So then, is AI our fault? Is it AI's fault or is it our fault? But we blame AI because it can't be us because we're the humans. And so we have to understand all that. And I think that that clarity is so necessary. That we have to do some of the hard work before we get to AI. And I think that we think that AI can solve everything, and it can solve a lot, but it can't solve everything. You know, I learned this lesson when I was running that tech business I mentioned. I brought on a board of advisors, like these smart people that built smart tech businesses because I want to surround myself with them. And I brought them in, and they gave me all this advice. And we would meet quarterly, and they'd give me all this advice, and they'd tell me what to do. And I'd leave that meeting with such clarity. And I'd go back to the team and say, this is the direction we're going. And we'd go, and we'd move. And then 4 weeks in, something would happen. A surprise would happen. And I didn't have ownership of the idea and clarity around the true problem to be able to navigate that hurdle effectively. I was scrambling. I was making things up as I went, based on what I thought that they meant when they said that the board of advisors said it to me 4 weeks prior, because it wasn't my idea. I was going to them asking a question on how to solve these problems without any framework for a potential solution. I wasn't asking advice, this is what I'm thinking. I was saying, how do you do it? and then trying to go be that person. And it didn't work once you hit those bumps. And it wasn't my idea. And I think with AI, you have to have the idea. You have to have the why you're using AI. You have to have the understanding of the process to enable you and empower you to use that free time. Because if you're not, what you're going to do is you're going to fill this time that is created with doing more of what you're already doing. That's the challenge. You're going to use AI, it's going to create a lot of time, and then you're going to fill it by doing more emails, more meetings, more all of that. And you're going to continue to spin your wheels, and you're going to get 6 months in the future and you say, well, why? What have I gained from AI? All I'm doing is now I'm sending more emails, having more meetings, and I haven't solved any of these big strategic things that I need or moved on any of these ideas I had. And it's because we didn't have intentionality. I think that like a lot of the feedback gets to is, well, we're in a service business. We're in a service business. Like, I need to respond to emails quickly, from my example earlier. And I get that. But like, what happens if instead we checked our emails at 9:30, 12:30, and 4:30? Are we able to, does that help us get with the markets going crazy to respond to our clients? Like, would our clients be upset if we respond to them in 3 hours? Or do they need to be responded to in 3 minutes? And we all think that it's 3 minutes, but 3 hours I think would be just fine. And so that's the idea of being intentional. Hey, this is how I'm going to structure my day. These are the processes I'm going to follow. This is the problem I'm trying to solve for. And here are the tools I'm going to use to help me. Some of them AI, some of them non-AI, whatever it may be. And I don't think that you should go in, I tried this, especially with those learning days. Like, I don't think it makes sense for us to go in and try to restructure our whole week and our whole way of working right away. Start small. Like, just pick one day a week where you spend 2 hours on something that serves your why. Thursdays from, I don't know if you're a morning person, 9 to 11. If you're an afternoon person, 1 to 3. Lock it off and don't let anything in there. And make sure that your processes from like email and everything of that nature and meetings are built around that, and structure it to go towards your why. And if you're using AI effectively, you should have those hours. You're intentional. I tried this idea of like structuring my Monday through Friday to be like so structured with color-coded calendars, and it works for some people. It just didn't work for me. It failed ridiculously because I tried to like restructure everything about my work as opposed to starting smaller. And like now I try to tell people how I work, and it's like, they're like, wow, that's crazy. But everything that I do has been built based small Lego blocks just stacking on top of each other. And it's as opposed to when I really failed was like when I had to try to rethink all of how I work. That never worked. But when I started something small like that 2-hour day or a theme day, and I did that consistently, I saw value, then I would be like, I want more of those. Or how do I get more of those? And I'd try to create my process for my tasks, and I'd use Paramethod and all that type of stuff. And that would be really helpful. And so I think that when we think about business and we think about AI, I think that one of the biggest fears is not that AI will take our job. I think it's the biggest fear is like AI is making us question our value. And I think that the underlying reason behind that of like, why are we questioning our value is I think that just business identity is a societal construct. Right? The idea of being busy and occupied makes us be viewed as being needed, important, that gives us our professional virtue. Like you go to a party, and like I even do this, just it's usually when I don't want to talk to someone. They're like, hey, how's things going? I'm like, just so busy. Because I know that how they're going to perceive that is making me feel important. So like that helps me and my ego at that time, even though I know it doesn't matter. And then there's like this like sense that they get it, like, oh yeah, he's got like so much going on. But like that's a society, that's a construct, but it's not necessary. Like it's actually, I think we should be saying like, I've been so bored, which has allowed me to create so many new ideas. Busy doesn't allow me to create new ideas. Boredom does. And so I should be saying I'm creating all these new ideas. And what that should say is that I've got a lot of time because I've created a process and intentional about it. What's actually valuable today is that this decision-making should become easier and more overwhelming because we're making more decisions because it's easier to make them. I think that that's the overwhelmingness. And it's not, the bottleneck is no longer access to information, as we've talked about. It's judgment prioritization and intentionality. That is the problem. I think someone saying that they are busy is a bunch of baloney now. I want to know what you're doing to solve for that busyness and the intentionality not to create time to just do more of what you are doing. Do more to then create this like exponential effect by rethinking how you work and what you do with your work that makes your time now exponential. And the way to do that, I think, is to look at everything that you're doing. Analyze it, look at everything you're doing, and analyze just a small bit of it and try to make that better, right? Here's the thing that everybody needs to know, and I'll be the first one to say, I used to write newsletters to our team about like what's going on in the world every week. And I thought it was so important. I'd spend so much time and I have anxiety about getting it out and getting out the right time and everything of that nature. And I was like, if I stop, like everybody's going to notice. And it was becoming annoying to write them. And I didn't feel like they were great anymore. And it wasn't that compassion. And I just stopped. And you know what happened? Nobody cared. Nobody said anything. Nobody even reached out and be like, hey, Matt, you're not saying that newsletter anymore. Why aren't you saying that newsletter anymore? I mean, it did hurt a little bit, but it was the reality. And I get it. Like we all think that what we do is more valuable than what others perceive it to be. And so we like burden ourselves around it. And sometimes you just need to quit things. I think in the world of AI, like there's a lot that we can quit. We can create, we can create capacity and we can protect our white space to do bigger things. And so the choice is really, I think, all of ours. Is that this world of AI is so exciting. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am. I can't wait to share with you some of the insights that I've gotten from my FutureProof Advisor AI and Wealth 2026 study. I just got the data. I'm analyzing it right now. And I'll just tell you this. Your clients want you to use AI. So use it. But they're going to require you to do more things that are not the same as what you're doing now. And that's our decision. Let's go create capacity with AI, but without purpose, what are we doing? So create a purpose, then start to create with AI and figure out what should I do with this time. So I appreciate you all. Thank you for spending some time with me today. And remember, like the episode, share the episode, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this episode. I want to continue to build this community with you all and build it together. And so I say, go out there and be part of the change that betters our industry. Stay well, be well, and keep on exploring.